Games Workshop's Chief Financial Officer, Rachel Tung, has not only decided to step down from her position, but also to sell 2/3 of her stakes in the company for the pretty damn nifty sum of £700,000, which is, what, about $1 million or so? $900,000? Certainly a pretty damn nice retirement package, no doubt about it whatsoever. But what does this say about the company itself? Now, I would like to tell you a story about furry rodents and vessels that travel on water, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. It's not like she ran out of the building screaming or anything, selling everything she had, but this is nevertheless a little bit telling. So the Chief Financial Officer, obviously, is the one person in a company that is going to have the most information as to the long-term projects, economically speaking, of a corporation. Choosing to sell a large part of the stocks immediately upon exiting the company is not exactly a vote of confidence, shall we say, and unsurprisingly so. With the recent Femstodes, or Femstodes, controversy going on, this is a very clear indication to the majority of us who have been paying attention for the last 10 years that GW is definitely heading in the direction of wokeism, of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and these very rarely, if ever indeed, have a positive economic consequence for the company in question. In fact, the majority of the time, companies who are already in dire financial straits are the ones who seek out ESG funding. Now, GW is definitely not in particularly economically rough waters at the moment. I'm not saying that is the thing here, but in every single instance where this has happened previously, we have seen a sharp decline in the company's value over the course of the next 5 to 10 odd years. Of course, as with all these corporations, it is a lengthy process. Look at Disney, for example. Disney has taken years to ruin Star Wars to the point that it has today, but it has still not actually managed to pay off the investment in Star Wars, despite obviously Star Wars being one of the single most lucrative IPs ever made. And yet Disney has not yet managed to make a profit, even as Disney's own profits too are of course going down, to the point where their streaming services, their main entry into entertainment, has been consecutively failing now for years and years, and the company in repeated earning calls is trying to put out a path towards profitability. This is Disney, one of the largest entertainment companies around. It has an enormous bank of IPs to draw upon. It had a position within the cultural mindset of the West that seemed unshakable, and yet even Disney has been able to be brought to its financial knees by a few years of DEI. So you can understand why the CFO of Games Workshop might be looking at that history and looking at Games Workshop going the exact same path and thinking, yeah, maybe I cash out now. I wouldn't be particularly surprised, as this is hardly a difficult to discern history here. Games Workshop has for the longest time been a company that has, and to mention as well, to continue on the female custodies thing, so Games Workshop has for the longest time continually argued that they are not a company that sells lore. This is blatantly false, of course, because the only reason anybody plays 40k instead of beating sticks and stones together in the woods is because of the lore context of what they are doing. You're fighting with an army of space marines against chaos because of what they represent, not simply because you want to roll the dice. If you wanted to, well, frankly, there are far superior alternatives out there. Without the lore, the tabletop would not exist. And hell, the thing is, even if the tabletop existed, if the lore existed, it could exist without the tabletop. The tabletop needs the lore. The lore does not necessarily need the tabletop. And so, of course, when changes are being made but in the lore for out-of-universe reasons that impact the tabletop negatively. So you begin by going, female custodians are canon, okay? This obviously undermines the lore, because the lore has already stated they are not canon, that female custodians do not exist, and they have not existed for 30 years worth of lore history. This, of course, then translates into the audience going, hold on there, what the hell are you doing? And now knowing quite clearly what exactly that is, wokeism, as I've talked about in 2 lengthy videos now. This will in turn then affect the law by devaluing it. It will make the universe less appealing, and its evolutions less appealing still. Furthermore then, there is no attempt to try and capitalize on the introduction of female custodies amongst the people who would at the very least now virtue signal by purchasing them. Where are the new models, GW? If you are truly a plastic toys manufacturer, why aren't you trying to push any plastic toys? This is your one and only chance, really, to benefit on the immediate virtue signal. And so not only is the company not selling the plastic, it is devaluing the law, and in turn also devaluing its tabletop by failing to do the preceding 2. To a chief financial officer, I do imagine that kind of looks like financial suicide. It's going to be a slow one, it's going to take years, perhaps even decades, but presuming that GW continues along this path, as they are quite likely to do, because once wokeism is in a company, it is very, 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 very difficult to ever get it back out again, then yes, the slow and yet inevitable economic decline of GW is virtually written in stone at this point. Even more so, as I've been arguing recently, the lore of 40k can survive without Games Workshop. GW is not 40k's keeper. It is its owner, in the same way that Disney is the owner of Star Wars, and yet that does not stop people from simply abandoning the new nonsense and embracing the old. The value of old-school Star Wars toys have remained pretty much consistent regardless of Disney's repeated attempts to invalidate them. Again, they hold let the past die, kill it if you have to, Rey Skywalker, and so on. Whereas the new toys are selling legendarily poorly year after year after year, with the one single solitary exception of Grogu, which is, I mean, if you want to have a toy that sells no matter what, then yes, a baby that goes goo goo aga and occasionally makes things float is a pretty sure hit even by Star Wars standards. But even then, one toy that sells decently in the entirety of recent Star Wars history is a pretty goddamn enormous flop, and if GW is seeking to emulate that rate of success, they're going to have a very hard time very quickly. Now, this might also be viewed in a different way, however, a slightly more nefarious one. If the various companies that are now moving into GW sees this an opportunity to essentially begin to tank the company's value, which I certainly wouldn't put it past entities like BlackRock, though I do think this is perhaps a pinch too conspiratorial for my personal tastes, as the simple solution is usually the best one. And the simple solution is quite simply that wokeism, the religion, the absolute moral credo of it, has gotten into the company. And now that it is in, well, you really only have 2 choices. You either absolutely abide by its tenets, or you agree that by your very own morality, you are now a bad person. This moral drive will commit Games Workshop to even further violations of their own lore and canon, and being continuously incapable of actually justifying it in any way that makes sense, they're only going to have to continue attempting to gaslight the fans, which will only continue to cause an even greater backlash every time they do it, until eventually, even the most naively blue-eyed of, oh, you know, I'm sure this doesn't mean anything, will have to get their eyes open for once and, well, wake up. I suppose is the correct term there, to what is actually going on at GW. This is not really a cancer that stops anytime soon. It's not one that seemingly can be prevented from growing. And so, yeah, once more, if you've been with the company for years and years, as this CFO has, you can probably see the writing on the wall. It is an interesting data point, nonetheless, even if, again, it could potentially mean nothing. After all, it is a hefty payout right there. It might simply just be a little bit of retirement money. Who knows? But I do think I've got a decent enough idea. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.